What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Flailing Forward podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to business owners and entrepreneurs who are out there doing the thing, taking the action. You may not feel like things are going great, but you're moving forward even when you're flailing. I'm your host, Dustin Seiler, and I am joined today by my guest, Reagan Sonnabend, who is working in Indiana, and we just connected. She's working in South Bend, so she's now Reagan South Bend. All right, Reagan, how you doing today?
I am great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to be here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you jumping on and joining. Now, you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, you're a woman-owned business, you're a real estate investor. You have gone through it. You've done a little bit of everything on your way up in the business world. And now you're just crushing it on corporate housing and some of these types of things. But where did you start your business in your entrepreneurial career?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I will say the same thing that my own kids would say, which is my family is all small business owners, or at least largely. I mean, obviously there's little things that don't go along with that, but pretty much everyone in my own family growing up was either a small business owner or an educator, one or the other. And both my dad and my grandma and my mom kind of caught in between the two of them really was a small business owner. So my dad was a dentist. My mom helped run the dental practice, but she also helped run my grandmother's fabric store, which is where I worked summers, weekends, all of that, growing up. And I learned so much more from my grandmother than I've learned from textbooks or anything else. So few people can count back change today. And I learned that at an early age. I can remember going down this little chart, like looking at, sales tax and then like cranking it into to the thing. But like counting back that change, if you have, change coming back to you today, if you even have cash,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's whatever, I'm going to give you an extra quarter. Nobody knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
But in any case, for me, it really did start with kind of coming into being an entrepreneur from a young age.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that. I remember doing that all the time. I learned it from my grandpa and my parents, where they would give you a nickel or a quarter or a dime. So they'd get either a dollar back or they'd get 50 cents back instead of all the change. And now, if
Right.
you do that, people are wondering why you're paying them more. It's just a
Absolutely.
different
They don't know
world.
what to do with that at all. And the time that that came together for me personally, which was a really long time ago at this point, but I did an internship for Disney when I was in college, and we went through a cash handling class. And
Yeah.
that was one of the first things they teach you, because sometimes people will come in and they'll try to trick you and you end up messing up, and then you end up with your drawer over or under or whatever it is. And so I didn't know at the time that my grandmother had really done me such a favor to be able to do that just more intuitively at that point.
Yeah, amazing. What a great opportunity to learn business ownership from the family at a young age. I have to imagine that those lessons kind of formulated your growth up the entrepreneurial chart.
Well, I mean, I guess that's one way to look at it today. There that all of those experiences for sure were just fundamental and foundational. I mean, when I think back to, working at my grandmother's fabric store or working at my dad's dental practice, both of them, summers, weekends, whatever. I mean, I can remember like exposing film, like nobody deals with real film. I can smell it when I talk about it.
Yeah.
And, the same thing is true, think in my grandmother's store. But in any case, I feel like I learned the most about customer service, about how to talk to people, to understand, what they need, and not just talk at them and tell them what you have to offer, but to understand what it is they need, because there's no point in having a conversation other than that. And, definitely a lot coming from my dad's dental practice as well. I mean, I feel really, really fortunate, truthfully, to have come from that sort of a background. It's certainly not fancy, but I learned so much, and it's just salt of the earth type of experience that you will never ever forget.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And it's so important to learn to listen to those customers, like you were saying, and read between the lines, because they're not always saying what they actually need or what the actual
So
problem is,
true.
right? So and I would imagine that, learning to do that, learning to interact with people, with customers especially, probably plays very well in your investing journey now, right? I'm sure you're using those lessons today.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because in my own kids, and it's kind of something I alluded to a minute ago. Like my daughters will tell you, like I'm the child of entrepreneurs, which is, a little bit of a wild ride at times. I mean, it's fun and it's awesome, it's all these things, but it's definitely not your typical upbringing, I would say. But it definitely does give you that opportunity to talk to people and hear those unspoken things because there is so much that people don't want to come out and say. And a lot of times the objection you hear is not the real objection that's going on underneath. And so it really is about finding the bunnies, as we know, like what's really going on here. And so it is a unique skill in a lot of cases to be able to get to what's going on under the surface.
Right. Well, communication in general has become a bit of a lost art, right? I mean, we communicate so much through text or other means now that the actual conversation and listening and reading between the lines and getting the subtext and everything is becoming a little bit less frequent. So having that experience and learning that early on has got to play really well in this world. So and I'm sure your kids are probably learning it from you as they are joining you in this journey, right?
Absolutely. I have to say, I'm proud of both of my girls. I've got one that's working a long shift today in 90 something degree weather. I know. And she's working at a local pool and they're having middle school night tonight. And somehow she ended up, working that shift. And I'm like, wow, the middle school kids and like in droves of hundreds at the same time in 90
Oh my
something
goodness.
degree weather. That's a lot to contend with. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I will say it has taught them a lot, and we've brought them along on the journey along the way. My husband's an entrepreneur as well,
Hmm.
so they don't know what it looks like to have normal healthcare insurance because we're always dealing with that entrepreneur insurance, and
Yeah.
it's a different situation for sure. It's like, okay, you're going to that HMO doctor, like it or not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the little things you don't think about on the entrepreneurial journey, right? What are we going to do about insurance and all those other things? No, that's amazing. So tell us about what you're working on right now in your investing and entrepreneurial career.
Well, my own focus for quite some time has been on corporate housing. And, for me, that started most recently in the early 2020s, but it actually went back to long, long before that. I first got started in corporate housing in the late 1990s, which I know it wasn't even as much of a thing. It was called temporary housing at that time, but
Yep.
it was a little bit of a right turn from the hospitality business for me because that's what I had been doing. That's what I was doing early in my career. But while I was in grad school, I needed to reliably be working business hours. I couldn't do that in hospitality, so I spent a little time in corporate housing and learned so much. It was actually really cool to be a part of things that we look back at, today, and like now everybody talks and refers back to COVID, but back then the thing was Y2K. We
Hmm.
were completely busy with all of these thousands of consultants that were staying for years working on trying to solve the Y2K problem so that when the switch flipped that everything wouldn't just stop. Thankfully they got it right, but that was quite an experience. So that's how I got started back then, but
What?
today it's really evolved a lot. Sorry, you have a
No, no.
question, I
I
can
was I
tell.
was just gonna say, why corporate housing? You were working in hospitality. How did you end up with corporate housing? I mean, that is a right-hand turn there.
It is, but it's related. It's kind of like the cousin almost, right? Because there's 100% hospitality that goes along with corporate and temporary housing.
Sure.
If you think about it, like everyone you're dealing with is a household in transition. Sometimes they're coming from overseas. They're coming from a different area of the country. They're kind of unsettled, and a lot of times you, as their corporate housing provider, are that kind of stability. Like you're that person they call, like you're the number that's on the sheet that they call late at night when something's not quite right. And
Hmm.
so it really is its own form of hospitality. So my rationale at the time was I really liked the hospitality space. I didn't want to move too far away from that. I just needed to be able to work business hours. And so it was really easy for me to transition right back into hospitality when I was done with my MBA. And
Hmm.
of course, at the time, for many years later, I had no idea that I would come back into it later. And, here I am.
Okay. So you went back to hospitality from corporate housing after you were done with your graduate degree,
Yes.
and then you ended up back in corporate housing again.
Many years later, yes. I guess the
Okay.
last time I was in hospitality before I got back into corporate housing was probably like 2002 or so.
Okay.
So there was a good 20 years in between almost.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's it. That I would imagine there's been a little change in corporate housing from the late 90s to now.
Oh, yeah. Very much so. I mean, there's certainly, just like with any old school industry and like with yourself in healthcare, when you're in something that's highly regulated and you're going to have systems and things that change at a glacier's pace, right? And that's normal and that's how it is. Sometimes you're dealing with systems that look like they were made in the 1980s and they
Yeah.
might have been, right? But the reality is that's all that way for a reason. But it has certainly changed a lot. I can tell you that at that time when I was, in the space back in the late 90s, we were dealing primarily with consultants and film crews.
Hmm.
And, certainly there's that. But today there's a big part of it that's insurance housing, families that have been displaced, due to a fire, flood, something like that. And that's actually something I've experienced myself. I was actually in temporary housing at one point. So I understand how disruptive that can be for a family when you've got kids going to different schools and then all of a sudden you're 20 minutes away and how do you make all of that work? It's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's the common bond that I see with everyone that we're helping is that they are in transition in one way or another. And so I really look at our team as, a kind of a foundational piece and that hospitality piece to help them bring it all together and answer the questions that nobody else is answering.
Gotcha. And that's where you can really make a difference. And that's where your business really thrives, right? Is when you're answering questions that nobody else is answering, when you're solving the problems nobody else is solving.
For sure.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest differences you see besides the companies that you're working with? You said it's expanded a little bit. What are some of the biggest differences you see in corporate housing between when you first started and now? And are they for the better or are some maybe not as great?
I wouldn't say good or bad. I would just say it's a different mix. I know we've talked about like in my own business, we're spending or putting a lot of focus on workforce housing over the last 2 years or so, and that can take a lot of different shapes. One of the things that we've seen, whether it's an infrastructure project, it might be a road or a bridge project that's being funded by the state, or it could be, a large industrial construction project. These types of projects take a long period of time, and you've got a certain order of operations that happens. It's very reliable. You've got, your excavation that comes in first. You've got, electrical that comes in. You've got your pipe fitters. You've got, all these different trades that come in. And it's actually great exposure, to all the different trades. It's, something I think that, we talk about in different ways. And one of my daughters is a mechanical engineer by trade. And, you think about like, and this is kind of going to a whole different thing, but like, there's a lot of emphasis about focus on the trades these days. And when you think
Yeah.
about businesses and what people are doing in the silver tsunami, there's a lot going on in trades that maybe is going to have a bit of a renaissance. Like it's those same trades, but it's people thinking about it in a different way and another form of entrepreneurship. But in any case, I really find it very interesting to understand what's going on with these projects, to be able to kind of deconstruct it and to help with that, and to help people have some semblance of kind of stability in those situations. Like I'm dealing with a group right now that they're going to have anywhere between 6 and 12 units over the next 24 months. They'll be rotating people in and out, and that's okay. But they're giving them that foundation of, hey, our company is going to put these apartments here for you, and you're not going to have to worry about going to a hotel front desk at night, on a holiday, or finding out that there's something weird or gone wrong or whatever. But all you got to do is just check in because this is the same unit that we have. And so I really have a great appreciation for the employers and the businesses that go out of their way to make the people that are doing the really hard work comfortable, because the reality is sometimes people that are doing this type of work, it could be disaster work, it could be a lot of different types of work. They're working long hours, long shifts. They often have to drive after that. So whatever it is that we can do to make things easier, and for once they get home, for them to be able to feel settled and comfortable, that's part of our mission.
Yeah, that's incredible. Um, With all of these contractors rotating through, you ever pick up any good contractors for your projects?
That's a really good question. Sometimes I'll get, volunteer like, hey, I can help with this or that, or my buddy over here can help with this or that.
Yeah.
But not, I have yet to take advantage of those offers. Yeah, because, it's just a different animal and kind of keep it, I guess, separate things, but believe me, there have been times where it has been tempting for sure, because for myself, for yourself, as developers and investors, we all know that, your contractors and, in my case, and as a corporate housing operator, operations teams that do cleaning, maintenance, lawn service, those businesses that people don't always see are actually have so much to do with your success.
Oh
And
yeah.
so having a team that you can count on is huge. And it's always tempting to try to, get a little help here and there, but it's not something I've tried just quite yet.
Yeah, yeah, boy, a good contractor is worth their weight in gold. I mean, everybody's looking for them and nobody wants to share them. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, that's key. But you also want to be respectful of why they're there and not intermingle. So I get what you're saying. What's one of the bigger needs that you see in corporate housing right now?
Hmm. Um, Really interesting question. I guess I wouldn't really look at it so much as a need, but maybe an observation. And that is because a lot of what we do has to do with insurance housing, and even more so that we haven't fully tapped into yet with disaster related housing,
Mhm.
that, there's need to think creatively to solve
Mhm.
problems. Um, and sometimes there's more cooperation needed from municipalities as far as what we're allowed to do. There have been situations where we've had families that have been hard to place
Yeah.
and they can't find what they need where they need it. And we would love to, put an RV in their front yard or a container home in their front yard, but the municipality won't allow it. But
Mhm.
that's what would solve the problem, right? And so I guess that would be the biggest thing I would say there is that, when you're dealing with more urgent situations like that, not everyone thinks creative like we do, right? Like I think
Yeah.
we've kind of trained ourselves to do that because it's just the way that we operate. But unfortunately, municipalities, states, red tape, things like that don't necessarily think that way. And so I think it falls on us to really try to be that translator between point A and point B, and try to help bridge that gap and have those conversations and figure out like, okay, well, here's what we want and here's what you're offering. How can we kind of weave it somewhere in between and make this work? Because we've got a family that's in a tough situation here, and
Yeah.
sometimes lots of families.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Plans are great when everything goes according to plan. But, natural disasters, accidents, they're called accidents for a reason, and it's because you weren't planning on them. And there's got to be a little bit of give and wiggle room and, like you said, creative thinking there in order to deal with these unexpected situations because you can't plan for an unexpected situation. So, do you do any work with local municipalities where you're operational to try and overcome some of those? Have you met with them at all?
That's a good question. I would say it varies. There are some municipalities, and one that I have a lot of exposure to right now. I'm trying to be less involved there because I've seen a lot of friction. And sometimes you just see you're barking up the wrong tree. And so it's like, okay, well, let me try to find the next place that's close to there that's a little easier to work with.
Yeah.
But in other cases, actually I have an off-duty policeman that does lawn service at one of our properties, and so it's really been great to have some conversation there, to really have real discussions about like these are some of the things that we're seeing, and what recommendations do you have? And so I think it's like a lot of things where it is really a matter of trying to get in the room, have the conversations, figure out where the common ground is and where the red tape and those challenges are, because I feel like that's where a lot of our hurdles are that are hard to overcome, whether you're talking about a municipality. And the same thing is true with insurance, actually, because we deal with so much insurance. There are so many fairly rigid guidelines that are in place. Sometimes figuring out how to navigate that in a way that, you know, meets all of those requirements, but also allows the family to have the relief that they need.
Yeah.
Boy, that is tough, but it's something that we have to do. So sometimes I feel a little bit like a politician and, having to try to figure out how to navigate those things, but that's the space that we play in.
Yeah, well, that's good for people to know if they're looking at going into this kind of housing. Understand a lot of it comes with playing the game, playing the politics, massaging the situation and talking to the right people to get things done. What kind of demand are you seeing out there for this type of housing right now? Is it pretty niche? Is there a large demand? Is it being fulfilled by those who are doing it? Are there more people needed?
That's a really good question. When I think of corporate housing, and then, depending on who you're talking to, they might say corporate housing, they might say midterm rentals.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different flavors of that. Workforce housing alone is pretty vast. You've got travel medical professionals, you've got construction workers, you've got, we deal with a lot of union workers that, they're just going from one per diem job to the next. And
Mhm.
so, there's so many different ways that that all plays itself out. But, I would say that in trying to really understand the space, it's kind of being a student of what you're seeing around you. And I always pay a lot of attention to economic development.
Mm.
How many people are moving into a given area? Who are they working for? What are they doing? Because a lot of times, if you really get in on the front end of what's taking place, you can help with not only the construction piece, but then whatever comes after that. Because whatever it is they're building, there are going to be people there to run that as well. And
Right.
so you're really looking at that give and take of population growth and what's going on overall when you're looking at those macro trends. But then when you're talking about things like insurance housing, that can happen anywhere, anytime. So you could be in a small area or a large area, and there could be a lot of demand for that. But you also need to look at common things that generate the need for housing. So, it could be hospitals, it could be, academic institutions, it could be headquarters of new businesses. We tend to look a lot at the intersections of highways, like where's everyone coming and going? And if you put the, pin in the center point, where could you get within 15 or 20 or 30 minutes? And you look at those concentric circles.
Mhm.
So I really find myself looking a lot at those types of trends that I never thought earlier in my career that I would have been looking at in that way.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and you mentioned earlier that you sort of cluster your properties, which is very helpful when you have a group that needs to come in and needs a bunch of properties.
Hmm.
For those who are looking at getting into midterms, corporate housing, that kind of thing, they're evaluating areas that they want to be, but they're just starting out. Would Is it worth going with just one property? Should they be trying to get a fourplex or a sixplex or a multi-unit right off the
Ah.
bat? What do you think?
Wow. Well, I would say most people probably would not start there, but it would be a shrewd move to do something like that. If I were to start over right now today, I would probably start with a fourplex.
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of fourplexes. There is so much you can do with that. You can have some long-term, some midterm. I mean, obviously everything's going to depend on, what's allowed in your local municipality, what's going on in the area, and just, finding the right way to blend the different residents that will be there. But yeah, I just feel like it's hard to go wrong starting off in that kind of a place. And then that's like a house hack on steroids too, depending on, exactly how you're doing that.
Yeah, okay. That's fantastic. What kind of systems and processes do people need to have in place in order to be in corporate housing?
Ooh, sorry, I'm having to think back a little bit because if I'm thinking about like starting off in this space, it looks a
Yeah,
lot different than it does once you scale.
sure.
And so I think that starting off, some of those same fundamentals are true. You need to follow economic development. You need to follow. I very rarely drive past a construction trailer or a crane. I poke around and see what's going on there, right?
Mm.
Like, I mean, again, going back to my roots in hospitality, when I was in hotel sales, you don't like drive past another competing hotel. You look to see whose trucks are in the parking lot. And
Yeah.
so you have to kind of like really get in the middle of it to see what's going on in a given area. But you kind of really do need to start off in a grassroots kind of way, and you can't really scale in this space until you've established credibility and done a good job for folks. So you have to earn your way into doing more, and so then that scaling will kind of happen organically over time.
Gotcha. So, as someone who's gone through the organic scaling process and now you are at a higher level, what are you working on right now, and what are some of your biggest needs?
Well, I'd say, it's really themes that I find are playing themselves out in different areas. And one of the things that our team does is we try to become the go-to housing provider once we've done a good job for an organization. So, it's a matter of really getting to know your clientele. And, if they're with you right now for a 9-month project, they're probably going somewhere else after that. And they're probably taking a similar sized team there. So it's a matter of taking that same concept and doing it in a larger way. And I've been really fortunate that, through our investor community to have a lot of people that I know and trust available that can help with different things. And so I've got a team that's helping out. In different geographies and not only sourcing housing when we have requests for that, but also finding out what's going on in their local area, or maybe a little bit bigger local area. But just like I said, those same things hold true. Like what is happening, what's developing, what's being built, where are people moving, all of those things are the same things that generate the need for this type of business anywhere you go.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. So, for those young people or old people who are just starting to become entrepreneurs, you've seen it from the ground level up to running a very successful business. What are some tips or pieces of advice you'd give to people who are wanting to be entrepreneurs or who are just starting on their entrepreneurial journey?
That's a really good question. When I think of that, I realize at different points in my own entrepreneurial journey, I didn't do things that I've done today. And what I mean by that is I can remember 20-ish years ago, maybe not quite. Yeah, I guess it was 20 years ago. Going and sitting, in Chicago City Hall, trying to find out about becoming a woman-owned small business and that whole certification process. And
Yeah.
at that time, I chose not to do it because I didn't have a vision of what I could do with that. Now, what I've done is I've paid a consultant to help me with that. And
Mm.
it took a long time still, and it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and wanting to bang my head against the wall, but I got it done.
Yeah.
And now we just renewed as well. And it's almost like the same process all over again. But, I think you have to have a little bit of a vision of what you can do at an institutional level, right? Like, I don't think that kids come out of college and say, how can I be a government contractor? But when you think about what's happening, we're all paying a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
Where is that going? And actually, there are a lot of carve outs. There are a lot of set asides for small businesses, for women owned businesses, for veteran owned businesses, for minority owned businesses. So, why should you not have a piece of that pie? So, you really need to think about like, what are the ways that I can serve my community in such a way that's really a win win?
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, you've got to have the vision. And honestly, that to me kind of says entrepreneurship might not be for everyone. If you
For
don't have a
sure.
vision or you're not a visionary or you don't want to put the time into that or whatever, it may be best to work for an entrepreneur rather than be the entrepreneur. But for those who want to own a business or who want to, see a change that needs to be made and feel like they can contribute in that, they've at least got to have that initial vision. And then I love what you did in that you paid a consultant to help you get across the finish line. You knew what you wanted, but you got some help. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? In bringing people
Mhm.
onto your team to help you fully flesh out the vision and get it across the finish line.
For sure. I mean, I have to tell you that part of it's like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. And I'm like, that absolutely would never happen. But at the same time, I understand the value of it. So it's like, let somebody else do that, right? I'm going to work in my zone of excellence and I'm going to do what I do, and I'll let somebody else do those other things.
Yeah.
But I agree that, I really challenge, kids in school today to think about entrepreneurship as a career path. In fact, I was presenting to my daughter's project management club last spring, and somehow I ended up going off on this tangent about like, okay, here's all this cool stuff about project management and different projects that I've had the experience of managing in different systems and different tools and all these things. But then all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, by the way, nobody probably told you this, but you're going you're in college, you're taking classes, you're doing all these things, and you're kind of being like fed down this path of becoming an employee, and you're going to be recruited. But it's like, why would you not just think about buying a business instead? Right. And so, that's the other part of it is don't feel like you have to fit into this specific thing. You need to do what's going to work for you with your skill set, with your, certain brand of excellence, and, how you can really move things.
I love that. Don't feel like you have to do what they're telling you to do. Break the mold, think outside the box.
For sure.
Absolutely. That's great. Um, what are you looking for in your business? What can people bring to you?
I would say today the biggest thing is, investment partners, capital partners. Maybe, that can come in a lot of different varieties. Maybe people that are new to investing and aren't quite ready to do it on their own and they want to learn alongside someone else. Or it could be someone that's, maybe far along in their career and they're kind of interested in investing, armchair investing, but they've got a pretty heavy W-2 and don't really have the time or the interest in doing that, but want to kind of learn about it. And I will say I myself have invested with a lot of others where I'm kind of intrigued and interested in what they do, but I don't have the time or the interest to become an expert in that. But I kind of want to learn about it and see what it's all about. And so that's what I would say is that others that are interested in finding different ways to get involved in other people's deals, investments, and learn about a different niche. We always have things going on that people could be a part of if they're interested.
Okay, great. And what is the best way for them to contact you if they're interested?
Sure. I would say the best two ways are on Instagram. My handle is just Reagan Sonnabend, my name, and on LinkedIn. I'm very present in those two places, and you'll definitely find me there.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put that in the description down below. So wonderful. Any parting words of advice for those who are interested in entrepreneurship and women-owned businesses and corporate housing and hospitality? Any last words of advice?
I would say just have no fear. Do your thing, make mistakes, learn the hard way because you're going to learn a lot more from your mistakes than you are from the things that go your way. Don't be afraid of that. Lean into that, figure it out, and you're going to survive whatever it is. It may be painful for a little bit, but you're going to learn lessons that will serve you well later. So just don't be afraid. Break some things, do stuff along the way. It'll turn out well.
Perfectly said. I love it. Reagan, thank you for joining us. Guys, this was another episode of the Flailing Forward podcast. Thank you for joining us. Get out there, take the action. You may feel like you're flailing. It may be difficult and tough, but like you just heard, it's going to be for your betterment. You're going to be moving forward. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.